All New Wolverine Volume 1 is a comic I've been waiting for years to read. Literally in the sense that this comic was first released in 2015, and I've only just now gotten around to reading it. But all joking aside, this book for the first time has X-23 in the role as Wolverine, something I've wanted to see Marvel pull the trigger on since they first killed off Wolverine in the comics way back in 2014. How odd is that to say, by the way, just as a side note? Anyway, Laura Kinney X-23 is one of my favorite characters Marvel has created in the past decade, and I needed to take a moment just to express how happy I am that this even exists. So thank you for indulging me. Onto the comic itself, All New Wolverine Launch is a part of All New All Different Marvel. This book is written by Tom Taylor and with art by David Lopez and David Navarro. The initiative was intended as a way to shake up the Marvel Universe and spotlight a new generation of heroes, All New Wolverine being one of the key figures during the launch. But does All New Wolverine live up to Logan's legacy? One way to find out, bub. All New Wolverine may not be the best there is at what it does, but it certainly has the potential to be, offering up a Wolverine tale that's tailor-made for X-23 instead of opting for a Wolverine light approach that some people initially called her back in the day. This allows for Laura's characterization to be the number one priority, and easily one of the biggest strengths the book has going for it. If you're looking at this character's trajectory, she's in such a different place than where she began, and that's great to see as a longtime fan. Laura's origin and the stories following portrayed her as a mute, abused both physically and psychologically to where she was almost machine-like with how she responded to people, killing without a second's hesitation. Thanks to her time spent with the X-Men and Logan's influence especially, Laura has moved past her former life and is much more comfortable in her own skin, despite having to still grapple with her inner demons. With Logan now dead, she strives to live up to her father's legacy as Wolverine. Issue 1 starts off with a cold open, featuring an extended action sequence of Wolverine protecting civilians from a sniper in Paris. The tension builds throughout the fight till the end, where Wolverine stops the sniper only to discover that the sniper was actually a clone of herself. Soon after the incident, she travels to Alchemax Genetics and is told by the head of the facility that 3 other clones of herself are on the loose after an escape attempt, the result of which leading to numerous civilian casualties. Laura agrees to track them down, but nothing is as it seems. Turns out the 3 clones, Gabby, Bellona, and Zelda, had nothing to do with the deaths, and were used by Alchemax as an attempt at a cover-up. They only wanted to leave so that they could live out the rest of their short lives in peace. Wolverine agrees to defend them from Alchemax, and along the way they interact with various corners of the Marvel Universe, including Janet Pym, the Wasp, Taskmaster, and Doctor Strange. The concept of the clones with X-23 is a strong idea to explore. Unlike other characters, like Spider-Man for instance, where it's not a good idea to bring up clones again, Laura on the other hand is a clone herself, so there's definitely some potential here to mine. The 3 clones serve as a parallel to X-23, helping to further showcase how far she's come along from her beginnings versus the clones' mindset, still being raw from their time with Alchemax. And seeing Laura act as a guardian for these characters is gratifying. She's finally come full circle. Visually, the clones each look different from each other. There's Gabby, who's around 10 or 11 and seems to be the most innocent of the bunch. Bellona, who's the most weathered with her white hair, scars, and short temper. And then you have Zelda, who's the de facto figurehead of the 3, and the most even-tempered. Also, coincidentally, looks the most similar to Laura. The action is well choreographed throughout, and each issue flies at a breakneck pace with no shortage of exciting moments. You know those books where there's a ton of talking but not much going on with plot progression or action to where it feels like it's meant to be read as a trade? All New Wolverine is on the opposite end of that spectrum, emphasizing action each issue. Some highlights that come to mind include Laura jumping into a car and slicing off its steering wheel in order to derail it, fighting the lethal mercenary Taskmaster, and facing even more out there threats like a monster from Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum and nanites within a character's bloodstream. So if you're looking for an entertaining superhero romp, you've come to the right place. It cannot be said enough that this element is handled as well as it is due to the stellar artwork from David Lopez and David Navarro. The inside credits have both Lopez and Navarro listed as simply artists, with no specifics given to their contributions. I was initially confused about this given how the book does not feature any noticeable change in art style, so I reached out to both of them through Twitter, and Lopez was kind enough to clarify this for me. According to Lopez, both artists had a hand in designing the characters and the environments. Lopez then worked on the storytelling and main figures, while Navarro did everything else including designs for the clones and robots. With that clarification in mind, I have no idea how else Marvel could have credited their contributions. Both played a major role in the book, and it does not break down as simply as a penciler or inker like in most comics. Their efforts lead to a seamless book. Somehow the visuals are able to stay consistent from issues 1 through 6 with no drops in quality. Given the nature of their collaboration, that is an astounding feat. Consistency is an important method of getting readers invested in your story and the characters who occupy it. And it's not to say you can't achieve that with multiple artists. Deathstroke Volume 1 was able to walk that tightrope effectively. It's a hell of a lot easier to do that when it's the same visual team from beginning to end. On a side note, the suit design for Laura looks great. It's a smart and tasteful redesign for the character. Though, small nitpick, I just want to point out for my own preference, I really wish the suit was orange and brown. It's my favorite visual for Wolverine, and could see that suiting Laura a bit more than the standard yellow and blue. What didn't help with this was the concept art variant in the back, where the suit was actually black and yellow, and even that would have been a cool design for her if they were looking to make the suit her own, and not just be, similar to Wolverine, but like a clever redesign. Back to the writing side, this comic is my first exposure to Tom Taylor's work. I've heard great things regarding his time with the Injustice comics at DC, and I can see why he's rising through the comic ranks in terms of fan reception. He has a good blend of action and character moments with his issues, and even does a good job in making guest stars feel like fun additions to the book, though I'll delve a bit more into that element later on. Most of the characters have their own distinct voice, and his dialogue is gripping, especially in a couple of key sequences. Even his jokes tend to land with me more often than not, the standout one being when the group arrives to Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, and Bellona is perplexed by a cupboard that winks at her. Even though she says it herself, it's not possible for it to do so, and they even pay it off later in another really cool gag. Taylor can also pen some genuinely touching moments when he wants to, particularly in issue 1, which is my favorite in the book due to the sheer confidence it exudes from the very opening page. During the sniper fight that I previously mentioned in the issue, there's a brief break in the action where Laura experiences a fever dream after being shot in the head. In that fever dream, she's with Logan from their X-Force days, and in it, we get to see Logan act as a father figure for her. I don't remember seeing many of those moments in the comics, and I've read a fair share of X-23 comics, but maybe I missed those. But as it stands, it was nice to see that, and it also served as a way of showing us why Laura is so intent on taking up the Wolverine mantle. Another human element that Taylor adds in is whenever Laura recovers from fatal experiences, her brain has a bit of a reboot cycle to it, where she isn't fully aware of her surroundings, so she has to do things like having to relearn what rain is. I can see how the Injustice comics were so popular if this was the style he brought to those, and if he can bring more moments like that into his series, then this really does have the potential to be something truly special. Though this opening volume did leave me with one major question that I hope the later volumes can answer. Why doesn't Wolverine kill? I don't necessarily have an issue with this approach, but there's no real explanation given as to why. It certainly can't be because Logan didn't kill, so it's not quite the same as Azrael taking up the mantle of Batman. This choice seems to be tied to continuity, and it would be nice if the moment that made her decide on this path was at least referenced in the story or the recap page, for us to better appreciate this more restrained take on Laura. As it stands, it comes a bit out of nowhere for someone who is a new or lapsed reader. To his credit, Taylor makes a solid effort of introducing Janet Pym, Doctor Strange's Bizarre World, and Taskmaster to new readers. Even select bits of Laura's past are integrated well into an excellent visual sequence with Doctor Strange. They're effective at getting readers enough about the characters to understand them, then letting them loose into an adventure with Laura. There's a good balance of giving context while not letting the exposition bog down the story. However, even though the guest stars are well integrated and entertaining, especially Laura's interactions with Doctor Strange, it unfortunately backfires a bit on the main narrative. Because of the guest stars, we have fewer pages with the clones that we need to fully invest in them. We don't get a sense of all their personalities. Gabby and Bellona fare pretty well. We get a pretty good sense of them. But where this becomes most evident is with Zelda, who is supposed to be the pillar of the three. And yet I can't get a sense of what makes her stand out to warrant that. There's a major plot point involving her that impacts the other characters, but I feel like it could have been more impactful if we had more time with them, and seeing these characters interact with each other a bit. The bits we get are nice, but the majority of the book involves the group running away from or confronting something. There's not a lot of downtime. And because of the previous flashback with Logan, I would have loved to have seen a moment or two play out between the sisters. I still like them well enough, but it still feels like a bit of a missed opportunity given where the story eventually goes. There's also an awkward moment in the story that seems like it was added in solely to address some of the internet backlash over Laura becoming Wolverine. Laura mentions that there were some people who didn't approve of her becoming Wolverine, and it's quotes, mostly guys on the internet. That felt off to me. Laura's a teen, sure, but she doesn't strike me as someone who uses the internet much, let alone cares what the internet has to say about her. That's not to say you can't address criticism or backlash with your work, and I certainly don't want to insert my ideas on how to handle the backlash. It's just the way it was handled within the book felt a bit clunky and took me out of the story for a moment. The villains for Volume 1 left a bit to be desired as well. Alchemex is doing villainous things for nothing discernible yet, though they could be a cog in a larger plot depending on where Volume 2 goes. We'll see about that. As it stands, though, they were taken out pretty fast for an organization of that size. Taskmaster sadly falls into this category as well. He's introduced as a cool villain, sure, but he also gets taken out pretty convincingly and pretty fast. And even though his fight with Laura was a lot of fun, that felt like a bit of a letdown for me. Like maybe he could have been like a reoccurring villain or something. And maybe he still will be. That's the funny thing about reviewing a comic, that there are multiple volumes of this thing out. So like a criticism I could make about Volume 1, maybe Volume 2 fixes it. That's kind of the curse of reviewing comics that are ongoing as opposed to a film. As for the paper quality, it ultimately lacks in comparison to their competition. Whether you're referring to DC or the independents, it doesn't matter since both are better on a consumer level. Now mind you, the art still looks good on this paper, but it feels flimsy. You can tell right away that you've read the book from the way the cover bends, and it's a thin trade in general and doesn't appear like you're getting 6 issues of story. It's weird to say, but when you look at an independent or DC trade, it could be 4 or 5 issues, and they could be the same size as a Marvel trade in terms of issue count. But it's always going to just look a little bigger than these recent string of Marvel trades. The book is priced at $17.99 for 6 issues. Now, I would normally say that's a fair price, especially when you consider that the issues themselves were priced at $4 an issue. And obviously, it would cost you a lot more to collect this thing monthly than trade. However, considering the quality of the trade itself and some of the problems I had with the story, things start to add up a little bit. Someone could fly through this book due to the fast-paced storytelling, and it might not be as fulfilling as you'd want it to be. There's certainly potential for it to get to that point with Taylor's strong characterization of Laura and the premise of the clones, but it hasn't quite fully come together yet. I did enjoy this, but I still can't give it the full price buy recommendation, as much as it pains me to say that. I would say to pick this up at a discounted price, preferably $15 or under. I feel bad ragging on this one given how much I enjoyed it, but ultimately not everything is going to come out of the gates guns blazing. Sometimes it needs a little bit more time to simmer and hit its stride. Thanks for listening to this review, everyone. Before I go, I'd like to get some feedback regarding my approach to future reviews. Volume 2 of All New Wolverine is something I certainly plan on reading in the near future, but I have to ask, would you like me to continue discussing this series? I'm honestly hesitant to review Volume 2 due to it being advertised as a Civil War II tie-in, and that's not something I've discussed yet on my channel, and it's a bit of a touchy subject when it comes down to events and tie-ins. And especially since I haven't read Civil War II, so basically the review of Volume 2 would be just on the book itself. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, let me know in the comments. That'll kind of help me to get a gauge for the interest on that one. Since, like I said, I'm a little hesitant, but if the comments sway a certain way, I'll likely consider it. Anyway, thank you again for your time, and I'll see you around.